Most teams that are doing some form of Agile are doing a daily Scrum, a daily stand-up meeting, right? Mm-hmm. Where teams are coming around, meeting together at the same time every day. Typically it's in the morning, and we like to say in Scrum, it shouldn't be more than 15 minutes. It should be just a brief kind of meeting for the team to collectively say, hey, are we on track to meet the sprint goal? And we could talk about that another time. But if your team is hybrid, not all in the office, mostly remote or all remote, this daily sync up meeting, especially if it happens in the morning, is an excellent opportunity to bring people together, to have that connection. I'm not saying you have to do some, especially not a forced kind of team activity every day or a cheesy question, to kick things off, but, try it. If it works, that's great. The thing that I'm looking for at that daily sync up meeting, especially in the morning, is do we have a process where we can hold each other to account?
Hey, welcome to Leading Agile Sound Notes. I'm Dave Pryor. I'm here with my co-host, Vic Bonacci.
Hey, everybody. Hey, Dave.
We're still getting used to doing these together and trying to come up with some interesting topics. So if you have suggestions, please send them to us. But today we're going to talk about something that Vic's been working through. I've been talking to teams that are also coping with it or trying to cope with it. And that is going back into the office, because now the pandemic is theoretically over, although it feels like it might be coming back. And a lot of companies are demanding that people return to the cubicle farm. So how's that working out?
It's been a ride, right? Working with each of these different clients or teams or whoever we're working with at various stages of making that decision and going back. Or as you said, maybe there's another wave. Are we then reverting back to our homes or wherever it might be? Yeah, it's a muddled up mess, if you ask me. But there's certainly some tactics that teams can do to keep that cohesion amongst the team. And I think that's what we're going to talk about here.
Yeah, and so some of them might be like fully back in the office after learning to work from home. Others, I've got some friends, I know you do too, that are doing like a half and half, like half in the office, half at home. And in some cases, they're not even coordinated. It's like you just have to show up for 3 days to justify the expense of the facility.
That's right. And that makes it very difficult on team members who might be expecting to meet with you in person. They maybe value those types of meetings better versus someone else is like, oh, I get all the information I need off of Slack or asynchronous communication. So it's good to be on the same page as your teammates in those situations.
And a lot of what we do is rooted in a framework or frameworks that were designed for people all to be sitting in the same physical space.
Yeah.
But that's not always the case. And as we learned during the pandemic, you can't actually survive without that. Right?
You can survive. And we've talked about some challenges. You've talked about them on your podcasts, on this podcast. I've talked about them in places as well. All the various tips, tricks, tools, process changes, improvements that you would have to make going from an in-person 100% the time environment to now everyone working individually from their homes. That was a cluster, to be nice, right? A nice little situation that happened back 2-3 years ago. And now over the last few years, we've seen that it's been hard on people in many ways, not just working together effectively, but it could have taken its toll through symptoms of like mental health issues, loneliness, depression, things like that. And there are many of resources for people to discover more about that. We don't have to dwell too deep on that.
We're not qualified to help people with that.
Certainly. But the thing I wanted to bring up related to that, though, is, we've just been through this whole set of changes over the last 2-3 years, getting adjusted to that. And now, depending on your organization, depending on your geography, depending on just your team even, some of us are now moving back, as you said, to either full-time in the office or some hybrid, and hybrids don't work. And I totally agree with you. Whether you're talking about Scrum or some other agile way of working, collectively together is one of the biggest benefits and drivers of a lot of that type of work.
So what have you seen teams do that helps with this, helps them cope with making this switch to like half and half?
Sure, sure. So if you have a Scrum Master, a lot of this, I'm calling to you right now, the Scrum Masters, to lead the charge. But team working agreements should always be reviewed, especially in cases of, hey, we're going to make this switch. It was just mandated perhaps by our organization that we need to be on site more often. So update your team working agreements. You should be doing that anyway. But in the team working agreements, I'm looking for things like days where we're all going to be in the office together, days where you can't count on people to be in the office together. So you don't always, as a team, have to be in the office on the same 3 days a week, but hopefully there is some set of days. Maybe it's Monday and Friday, maybe it's Wednesday and Thursday, whatever it is, where you can count on everyone being together. And then as you're updating your team working agreements and the schedule, make sure that your meetings reflect that too. If you want a sprint planning where everyone's together in the same office, or refinement, or sprint review, or whatever meetings you have, make sure that you align those with days that people are together.
Yeah. There's a whole bunch of things running through my head when you're saying this. And one of them, I'm thinking about it from a very selfish perspective. I'm somebody who's worked from home for a long time. I know you have too. And I thrive that way.
Yeah.
When I'm in an office, I feel far less productive because I'm always being interrupted and distracted and, all the stuff that's going on. If I had to go into an office 3 days a week, that would mean there'd be 3 days a week where I would plan to get nothing accomplished because one, I'd be spending a lot of time in meetings, and the rest of the time I'd be coping with the recovery of the fact that I'm somebody that loves working at home alone. And now I'm like surrounded by people and I have to wear pants. And all the other things that go along with that. That's tough, right? I mean, have you seen people like kind of struggling with that?
Absolutely. And what you're talking to reminds me of, I'm similar to you. I'm maybe I'm not as similar as you, but I'll qualify myself as being an introvert, right? Where I like to get my recharging when I'm usually typically alone or in smaller groups. But some people are the opposite, and they may be more extroverted and they need that time together. So every person is different, and hopefully your team is dynamic enough that there are people of all across the spectrum, right? Of whether they need that, they're more introverted or extroverted. So again, I think that's a conversation, whether it's around kind of team values. What do you value? How do you work your best when you're by yourself, when you're in proximity to others, when you're in the same room as others, or they're just available over Slack? I think those are valuable questions to have, and then consider the balance when putting together a schedule.
So that kind of takes me to a really interesting point. Like when I think about team working agreements, the way we used to do them, it was always how do we as a team decide that we're going to like cope with having to work together. But now there's a chance to approach it from the perspective of, I would like to be able to show up for my team in the best possible way. And part of that is I need to let these people know this is when I'm at my best to interact with you. And if we have everyone doing that, then maybe collectively we can design a workflow for our collaboration that allows us to be making the best possible use of that time when we are together.
I love starting off, and we both work at Leading Agile, as we said at the top here, but I love when I'm working with teams and starting to either start from scratch a team working agreement or revisit what they've already got. Starting off with those questions, Dave, like what's valuable to me to show up to work? What do I hope to get out of it other than the paycheck? What do I need out of work? Also, like, how do I work best? Like I talked about just a moment ago. So I think that's always a good technique to use and revisit whenever you're talking about the team's working agreements.
Okay. And what else? What about routine, things like that can make it easier for the folks that are there?
Sure. So most teams that are doing some form of Agile are doing a daily Scrum, a daily stand-up meeting, right? Where teams are coming around, meeting together at the same time every day. Typically it's in the morning. And we like to say in Scrum, it shouldn't be more than 15 minutes. It should be just a brief kind of meeting for the team to collectively say, hey, are we on track to meet the sprint goal? And we could talk about that another time. But if your team is hybrid, not all in the office, mostly remote or all remote, this daily sync-up meeting, especially if it happens in the morning, is an excellent opportunity to bring people together, to have that connection. I'm not saying you have to do some, especially not a forced kind of team activity every day or a cheesy question, to kick things off. But try it. If it works, that's great. The thing that I'm looking for at that daily sync up meeting, especially in the morning, is do we have a process where we can hold each other to account? So that if I show up and I say, hey, everything's fine, and move on, that kind of implicitly gives me and signals to the rest of the team that I'm not really I don't have a plan for the day. I don't know. I'm just going to kind of amble around with whatever. And if we are working from home, and we've been doing it for months or years now, a lot of us may have lost a lot of those good discipline habits that we might have had in the office. So I think using that early morning meeting or first meeting of the day to hold each other to account and kind of win that meeting by connecting with each other and following up on this routine, that could be very powerful.
You triggered something in me. So first, I want to echo something Ron Jeffrey said to me one time in an interview. It's sort of like yes ending what you just said. So yes to the idea of us holding each other to account, but what Ron said we should do is hold each other up. So if I saw somebody who didn't have a plan, like, hey, what's going on with you? Do you need anything? And I would feel obligated to tell my team, if anybody said to me, like, let's win the morning, I'm going to come at you with a bat. The whole thing, I mean, they tie together for me in that we have to be patient with ourselves and with one another and realize that some people, this is going to be very jarring for. Some people will want to do it. Some people won't know how to do it. And we have to be constantly checking in with ourselves and with our team members and seeing okay, what new adjustments do we make? Because this is a whole different thing, right? We were in the office, then we're at home. Now we're half and half. We're learning a third way of working together.
Right. It's an ever-evolving way of working, if you think about it. When we first showed up in the office 20 years ago together, however long we've been together, we had to relearn every time someone joined the team, every time we had to move from one side of the floor to another with our cubes, So it's an ever-evolving, I think, set of working agreements and ways of working together. But you're absolutely right. And I do acknowledge kind of what Ron Jeffrey said. I think I like his language a little bit nicer than what I heard. And I think the bottom line in that is just speak the words or the language that your team does. So if they're not all, some people are win the morning people, but if your team isn't, you don't want to get hit with a bat. So,
well, I think maybe it's both, because I used to feel like it was one or the other, but now I'm thinking, yes, I would want to know that people are going to hold me accountable. But I also would want to know that if I fail to deliver on something, they're not going to tear me apart. They're going to support me.
Yeah.
Because it is a big part of this now. And where in the work cycle would be a great place for us to check in and see what we need to change.
Well, certainly the dailies, but if you're doing Scrum, you've got an end of an iteration opportunity in the form of actually it's a double, because you can use the sprint review for that as well as the retrospective.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, so you could check in with your stakeholders and see how this is working for them, and then use the retrospective to focus. That's like a whole new dimension to the sprint review. How is it working for us as a team? And maybe look at the team, if you haven't already, start to look at it like a system that's relearning how to work together, and we're going to have to keep tuning that up.
Yeah, nothing says you can't do a mini retro at the end of a review while you've got your stakeholders there. Hey, is this format working for you? Is this time and day working for you? That's all part of the process improvement.
The interaction with them.
Yeah.
Very good. Also let them know what you need, too. Mm-hmm. Are there any other things that you feel like you've learned during the pandemic that teams should just automatically do?
I think the last thing I'll say, and it kind of echoes what we've already said, but the importance of connection is not to be discounted. People working from home, even if you check in with them and they sound good on the other side of the line, you don't always see their face, though, because maybe their cameras are off. Connection is so important that I would encourage you, if you are remote, turn on your cameras, if at all possible. I get it. Sometimes you need to have it off. You're eating, you're in a room with other people, whatever.
I don't know. You're a lot more tolerant of this than me. I am cameras on as as a requirement now. And I know that, people can make an argument, well, it might make some people feel uncomfortable. Like, if you're on a team and we're on camera, we're trying to talk and we want to communicate, well, you need to be on the damn camera. So turn it on. I don't care if you're eating. I don't care if your pets walk by or your kids walk by. Like, to me, that is something we have to make allowances for, because that happens to all of us. But the sacrifice you make by leaving the camera off, it interferes with your ability to communicate, with people's ability to connect with you. I don't know. I can't make room for that one anymore, which I know I should, but I can't. I'm the wall.
I'm an accommodating coach. Let's say that. But I'm with you.
I'm an intolerant bastard.
Yeah. Keep that connection ratio high is what I would say.
Yeah. Okay, cool. Any final words, tips, suggestions?
It's rough. Just keep communicating. If you're the Scrum Master, don't take don't take silence as consensus on this. Keep asking the question how people are doing, if they're getting what they need. And if not, don't be afraid to say, hey, let's look at the working agreements or let's talk about it.
Yeah. And maybe even have a conversation about, what does silence indicate?
Yeah. Oh,
right?
yeah.
If people choose to be silent, maybe that's a way of signaling something too. I think the only thing I would add at the end is just try to be patient with people, because it's hard for all of us, and we're going to have to learn how to do this thing together, and it's going to be just as hard as it was to learn to work from home.
I think this is a wrap, Dave. People can reach out to me at Victor. It is victor.bonacci@leadingagile.com. I know it says Vic in the video here if you're looking at that, but it's victor.bonacci.
Or dave.pryor@leadingagile.com. And if you have topics, questions, things you want us to talk about, let us know, and we'll put them in here. So thanks for watching.